Hello and welcome to the Criterion preview for November of the year of our Lord 2016. This is really late, but I'm hoping that it comes out just before the end of the 50% off Barnes & Noble's Criterion sale. It'll be great if you're able to get some recommendations from this video and then go on and maybe buy something from there when the shit is cheap. So without further ado, I'll get straight into this. The first film series box set is the Lone Wolf and Cub series. Now this series of 6 films, and actually 7 if you include the English dubbed mashup film Shogun Assassin, which actually got quite popular in the West and is something that I saw before I had even heard of Lone Wolf and Cub. It's adapted from this highly acclaimed, influential, successful manga series in Japan that apparently influenced Frank Miller. Basically follows a pretty standard samurai narrative. You have this Ronin character, the executioner of the shogunate, who is banished or his honor is lost, and basically he wanders the land with his infant son as the assassin Lone Wolf and Cub. Just fits into that just classic like samurai schlock genre with tons of just squirting blood, ridiculous action, insane flash zooms, and so on and so forth. You know the style. Overall, I'd give the series a 70 out of 100, though that's a really hard score to lock down because the quality across these 6 films does fluctuate quite heavily. The box set includes a new 2K restoration of the Lone Wolf and Cub series and apparently a high definition version of Shogun Assassin, though I'm not actually sure what that means. An interview with the writer of both the manga and the film series, Kazuo Koike, a booklet featuring an essay and film synopsis by Patrick Mazias, a silent film from 1939 on the making of samurai swords, which sounds kind of interesting actually, and new English subtitle translations. Overall, this is just a fantastic box set in my opinion, even if some of the films here are weaker than others. Also, the box art for this is just simply incredible, and it's one of my favorite releases from Criterion in that regard. I would highly recommend this if you're even remotely a fan of samurai cinema, or if you want to get into it. It's a lot more accessible than the 25 or 26 film long Zatoichi series. My full review of the series minus Shogun Assassin can be found here, and this will be the case for every other film that I discuss. Next up is the 1990 film Dreams by Kurosawa, also known as Kurosawa's Dreams. The title here is kind of confusing. Kurosawa, like many Japanese filmmakers, was extremely prolific, but his filmography isn't tarnished by mass production. In fact, it's bolstered by it. His films are typically brilliant, which is kind of crazy considering the sheer amount of them there are. In saying that, Dreams comes from the 1990s, which was by far the very pointy end of Kurosawa's career and his life. As such, it's kind of marred by some pretty subpar films, among which I would place Dreams. Basically, as the title suggests, this is just a series of Kurosawa's recurring dreams that he had across his life, which sounds like an interesting premise, but the actual execution of it really does not live up to that. This is a 62 out of 100 from me. This film isn't terrible, but honestly, and without hyperbole, there are 20 better Kurosawa films on Criterion already that you are just far better off picking up and not even concerning yourself with this. Anyway, this release includes a 4K restoration, which actually will be pretty nice. A lot of the visuals here are quite beautiful, especially in 1 or 2 dreams. A 150-minute documentary on the creation of dreams, aptly called Making of Dreams. Interviews with the production manager Teruo Nogami and assistant director Takashi Koizumi. Another documentary called Kurosawa's Way, which is made by Kurosawa's English language translator and features interviews from directors like Bertolucci, Inarritu, Miyazaki, but I'm not actually sure what this documentary is on though. It just contains those interviews in them. There's also an audio commentary from Stephen Prince, who basically does audio commentaries for every single other Kurosawa film on Criterion. He is great. Also includes a new batch of English subtitles, an essay from the film critic Bill J. Iberi, and I know I just butchered that name to death, and the script for a never-filmed Ninth Dream. As always, you can find my full review for the film here. Next up is the 2002 Paul Thomas Anderson film, Punch Drunk Love. I am so glad that PTA is finally getting something of his on Criterion. I've been waiting for this for so long. Punch Drunk Love is my least favorite of his films, but it's still great, which is obviously the sign of a good director. I mean, I'd love to see The Master or Inherent Vice or anything of his on Criterion, no matter how unlikely that is, but hey, I mean, I can wish. Basically, the plot of this film is that it follows Adam Sandler, who, of all people, delivers just a fantastic performance for this film, falling into this delirious and bizarre plot of being blackmailed by a phone sex worker whose pimp is a mattress salesman played by the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman. If the credits of Adam Sandler, Paul Thomas Anderson, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and that storyline aren't enough to get you to watch the film, then I really don't know what is. Overall, I score this an 83 out of 100. This release includes a restored high-definition transfer, though I'm not sure if that means 2K, 4K, 1080p, or whatnot, and that's a little bit worrying. I'm not sure why they wouldn't stipulate that when they do for every other film, but whatever. There's a short film piece by Paul Thomas Anderson called Blossoms and Blood, which features the main cast of the film, an interview with composer John Bryan, which is especially important considering how integral the soundtrack for this film is. On that note, there's also behind the scenes footage of the sessions of the recording of the soundtrack for this film, deleted scenes, additional artwork for the film, an NBC News interview with the real-life pudding guy, David Phillips, and you'll know what I mean if you've seen the film, a Mattress Man commercial, I'm not really sure what that means, I'm guessing it's a fake in-movie commercial for Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, and also an essay by Miranda Julie. My full review of the film can be found here. Next up is Breathless, and there's absolutely nothing I can say about this film that will in any way contribute to anything meaningful. There's not even really any point describing this film simply because it's so famous. I mean, if you haven't seen this, then you have to. It's basically one of the most important films ever made, as I am sure you know. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it, but it is absolutely mandatory viewing if you are even remotely interested in cinema. Also, on the note of Criterion releases, this is a re-release of their previous release of Breathless, which is kind of strange. They haven't really stipulated why they're redoing it again, and they have the same thing for 400 Blows. I'm not sure if this is a new transfer or not. A little confused on that one. Overall, it's an 86 out of 100 for me. I've always found it difficult to rate films like this that are so influential, where it's more important as to how the film fits into the film canon rather than its like objective quality as a viewing experience. The release includes a restored high-def transfer approved by DOP Raoul Cotard, who sadly died on November of this month, a week before this film was re-released on Criterion. This guy is one of the most important DOPs to exist, especially in the French scene, and I would highly recommend checking out his entire filmography, which is basically the filmography of Godard. Also includes interviews from these people whose names I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. Comes with 2 video essays, an 80-minute 1993 documentary on the making of Breathless, a 1959 short by Godard, and a booklet featuring an essay by scholar Dudley Andrew, and extras. Also, apparently this release includes new cover art, but it looks exactly the same to me. Next up is the 2005 Noah Baumbach film, The Squid and the Whale. If you don't know of Noah Baumbach, he recently directed the brilliant Frances Ha, which I absolutely love a lot more than this film. Basically, this follows the divorce of 2 parents and how their children react to it, including Jesse Eisenberg in his big kind of debut breakout role. It's a very honest and autobiographical drama, which I suppose is also my criticism of the film. In saying that, a lot of people really liked this film, and it was heavily critically acclaimed. So in that regard, in trying to be impartial, if you enjoyed Frances Ha, then I would recommend checking this out. In my opinion, if you want to pick up a Criterion of Baumbach, then do it for Frances Ha. Even Kicking and Screaming, his debut 1995 film, is far superior in my opinion. Overall, it's a 52 out of 100 from me. This release also includes a new 4K transfer of the film, which was supervised by Baumbach himself and his DOP Robert Yeoman, includes interviews with the principal cast and Baumbach himself, a behind-the-scenes documentary featuring on-set footage, interviews with the cast, and audition reels. Also includes an essay from Kent Jones and another interview with Baumbach, this time by the novelist Jonathan Lethem. Next up is the strangely Marlon Brando directed 1961 film One-Eyed Jacks. This is just such a strange film, not only because it's so like rough as an actual product, but also because it's directed by Marlon Brando in his sole directorial effort, but also because its production was extremely tumultuous, which I think is by far the most interesting part of this film. Stanley Kubrick, of all people, was initially set to direct the film, and the original script was written by Sam Peckinpah, but then later rewritten by Calder Willingham, who you may know wrote The Graduate and Paths of Glory. But my issue is that this film is just, it doesn't feel complete. It feels the weight of its production issues. This film serves mainly as a really good reason as to why the Criterion Collection exists, because you get to see this film in its highest quality and as its flawed self, but with the added information of context and all these essays and interviews revolving around how the film kind of came about and how it sits as a piece of film history. So it's really interesting from that regard, but overall the film is a 68 out of 100 for me. In saying that, I will probably rewatch it at some point because my thoughts on this film aren't entirely crystallized yet, and I feel like it really deserves a rewatch in that regard. This release includes a 4K restoration as supervised by Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, and the Film Foundation. Also includes an introduction by Scorsese, vocal excerpts from Brando taken during the development of the script, and an essay by the critic Howard Hampton. Now onto the cutting block. If I could only choose one release to buy from this month, it would have to be Lone Wolf and Cub. Obviously, this isn't the best film in the set. I would have to credit that to Breathless or Punch Drunk Love for completely different reasons. One, Breathless, obviously, because it's such an important film, and two, because Punch Drunk Love is just fantastic. But I can see myself watching the Lone Wolf and Cub series with friends over and over and over again. You get repeat viewings. There's also 7 films in there. Just the range of content is vast. I absolutely love the box set packaging. It's beautiful, and I can see myself kind of fawning over that. I'm a big fan of really intricate, nice, beautiful packaging to physical media like vinyl. So for that reason, I'd be choosing Lone Wolf and Cub, even though it doesn't sit on the artistic quality level of something like Punch Drunk Love or Breathless. If you're wanting to go for a single film though, I would probably recommend Punch Drunk Love, and if you haven't seen it, then just watch Breathless. One-Eyed Jacks is kind of hard to recommend because I think the experience is so dependent on how good the extras are in the Criterion release. While I think it does benefit from the 4K restoration, it isn't as important as how interesting the interviews will be, or the vocal excerpts, or the video essays, which will really serve to contextualize just how interesting the production history of the film is, which in my opinion is far more interesting than the film itself. Quite obviously, I'm not a big fan of The Squid and the Whale or Dreams. Basically, if you like Frances Ha and you really want to see some new Baumbach, and for some reason you haven't seen The Squid and the Whale, then I guess pick it up. I know a lot of people liked it a lot more than I did. Dreams, on the other hand, is a little harder to recommend. I honestly haven't seen really anyone defending it with very high scores. It's always kind of average to middling to, oh, I kind of enjoyed this. I'd really only be recommending it to hardcore Kurosawa fans though, honestly. And while I think this film benefits the most from a 4K re-release, considering the only previous version was this kind of dodgy DVD release, I don't think fixing the visual quality of the film fixes the myriad of other issues surrounding the film. Okay, and that's it. This one took a really long time to come out, and I apologize for that. I've tried to streamline this series down a little bit more than I previously had it, and I hope that's kind of to the benefit of it. Though, obviously, leave a comment, any criticism, feedback, whatever you prefer me to do with this series, or just anything really. There are links here to the previous Criterion preview, which I would recommend checking out, as well as the It Follows video essay I recently put out, which is one of my favorite ones I've done, actually. And that's it. Ciao.